Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy, ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moonkittee, your queer femme, poly kitchen witch, and proud geek. Today's topic is Elemental Magic Part 2! Yay!
Part two! Yep, because we could not do it all in one episode.
Exactly. And truthfully, this is really truly only part 2 of 3, in the
Correct.
sense that we are talking today about again, there's 4/5 elements, depending on how you're looking at it. And we're talking about the Western aspect of the elements. And I want to kind of clarify that because last episode I mentioned that the Eastern philosophy has 5 elements to start that are different than the Western aspects of the 4 elements plus spirit, which can sometimes be considered the 5th element. So we're talking about the Western aspect of it. I fully appreciate and the Eastern aspect of it as well. And I would love to hear more about that. Or if there's someone who wants to come talk about that, please, I would love to hear
Yeah.
more about that. But back to the topic at hand, we're talking about today in part 2, we're talking about fire and water.
Yes, yes, because part one, we did a deep dive on earth and air. So now we're going to
Right.
give fire and water its due. So basically, what do we mean by elemental magic of working with fire? What's the basics? Well, the direction of south, spirit like salamander, dragons, can phoenix, very fire, and then the color of red.
Mhm.
Those are just some basics like that you think of with fire.
Right. And for West, we're talking about, or excuse me, for water, and for water, we are talking about West as the direction,
Hmm.
nymphs, mermaids, other aquatic creatures, and the color blue.
Yes. And of course, not to ignore that there is a fifth element in many cases that we call spirit, which covers the, as above, so below, or center, or everything in between. So we have the four directions out, and then we also have, the direction of
Up and down.
spirits.
Mhm.
Yes, and that will be its own episode following this one.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. So next episode for spirit.
and thinking about elementals of the spirit would be
Hmm.
like angels,
Hmm.
archetypes, deities,
Hmm.
spirit messengers of many different forms, even ancestors,
Hmm.
and
Exactly.
they have their light and dark, lacking of light aspects. So yeah, and we'll get into all of that complicated stuff and next time, so you have to tune back in.
Right. We're keeping you on the hook.
Exactly. So let's start with fire then. How do
Hmm.
you work with fire?
Candles.
Yeah,
Candles
of
are the first thing that,
course.
that of course pops into
Burn, baby,
mind. Burn,
burn.
baby, burn. And again, if we're talking crystals were the first thing I picked up, candles were the second for that
Right.
ease of accessibility because you can get beautiful, fancy, gorgeous candles, or you can pick them up at the dollar store. The
Yeah,
candle itself is just the vessel for the intention, but candles work great for fire magic, obviously.
absolutely. I remember when, I don't know how other people experience the thinning of the veil at
Hmm.
certain times of year, but also it happens during certain life events, different milestones. For example, when I gave birth to my children, when my children, I have two, were fresh in the world, I felt like my ancestors were visiting, like, okay, good job. You procreated. Let's see what you did. Let's see what you made for, for our bloodline. And when you do have a lot of spirits visiting, they tend to have energies like signatures or feed off of energy. So like I will notice electronics are acting wonky if when during the times of the year where the veil is thin or some energetic stuff's going on. And so I kept having both times I had a baby in my house, the energy and the electronics started getting wonky. So what I learned to do was light, I can't keep a flame lit and
Mm,
tend to a candle, because then that's giving the energy that the spirits want to feed. So a lot of people will light candles to their ancestors or candles to spirit,
mm,
because the spirits like to feed off of the energy in the house or energy in the room or the space.
mhm.
And candle fire is a very, very powerful way to honor the spirits and give them the food that they need so they're not sucking the energy from your electronics.
And that's a really good example of how fire works to help with spirit and spirit
Yes,
magic and spirit
right.
energy.
It does. And
So,
those two are very connected, in a
mhm,
way. Now, fire isn't spirit,
right.
but just like, we very much have all parts of the elements that we embody, certain elements work very well with others, and spirit and fire are
Mhm,
very connected.
right. Other next ones would be oils. So
Oh, right.
oils and
Anointing candles with
anointing
oils, or
candles with oils,
burning oil, like an
mhm.
oil diffuser
Burning
would be it.
anything, really.
Burning anything,
let's, let's
motherfucker.
let's
Let's
be
go have a
real.
bonfire.
Any
Yes.
sort of burning or any sort of flame is going to
Yep.
connect to the spirit of fire.
And
It's
so
pretty simple
often,
that way.
one of my favorite simple spells is to burn something,
Hmm.
write it down. I've burned art,
Hmm.
because I feel like you can do that if you've taken a picture of it. So it still
Hmm.
exists, but bay leaves, you can write,
Hmm.
if you're trying to draw stuff in, write it on bay leaf and then burn it. Having a bonfire or campfire for ritual,
Hmm.
staying warm by the fire, there's its own magic in all of that.
Hmm. Absolutely. And if we want to get away from the actual fire and the very literal aspect of the element,
Hmm.
passionate or creative endeavors that involve action. So things like painting. So it's the action of creativity,
Hmm.
especially with painting and music. For example, those are things that truly embody that kind of fire element. Now, you may be, again, using mediums that are different and outside of the fire, but the act of doing so is that fire magic.
Yeah, I feel like even just like throwing a party or having a gathering
Hmm.
is like that spark of fire magic of, like, getting people impassioned and
Hmm.
excited. I know water tends to get all of the emotions, but like
Emotion.
fire is like big into passion, big into
Hmm.
the creative spark. Again, where it works with spirit, the spark of inspiration for
Hmm.
creativity. But just like that warmth of hearth and home and sharing
Hmm.
food, the fire in our belly where we digest food,
Hmm.
that's another aspect of fire magic. So it's all about what we're passionate about, what we want to create, our desires. Oh, that's
Hmm.
hot, right?
Hmm.
We even talk about our desires in terms of
Yes.
fire, like, oh, they're hot. Look at that
Hmm.
hottie.
Exactly. And it's not just about like everything else, fire is that two-edged sword. And it can also be about destruction and
Yep.
release. And destruction is not always a negative thing because destruction breeds creation, which is, again,
Mm-hmm.
essentially the nature of fire is creativity. Having that aspect of destruction breeds the creativity that breeds the next stage of to what something
Right.
that's happening.
Sometimes destruction is necessary,
Hmm.
it frees
Absolutely.
us. Yeah. And sometimes it's really freaking scary because
Oh, yeah.
we live in a state, and many of the states around us who go through incredible wildfires,
Yes.
especially as the earth warming and,
Hmm.
global warming and all of that has intensified. We talked in last episode about the wind to power and
Hmm.
of hurricanes and tornadoes, but there are like fires that have gotten so hot and so intense that it's caused storms,
Hmm.
lightning. It's like created lightning, and it's created tornadoes.
Hmm.
That's just scary. So, yes, never underestimate the power of elements. And then if I've said
Right.
this before, it's because it's very important.
Yes. And fire, think volcano as being able to
Yes.
also absolutely shape the weather, shape everything else around it and its nature of some things that are happening. So again, destructive energy at its most extreme, but at its most basic, it brings us life and warmth and allows us to continue. So it's all about that spectrum. And
Yeah, and I even think there's a fire elemental to like the sun and the daylight,
oh
because,
yeah.
the fire is a big gas ball of burning
Hmm.
gas, and
Yeah.
it helps us grow food.
Hmm.
You know, it's very essential to life. That's
Hmm.
why Prometheus stole it and gave it to the humans.
Exactly. In tarot,
Mm.
Fire is the suit of wands generally, and wands are
Traditionally.
about casting action, inspiration, creativity.
Mm-hmm.
It's again about that action of doing something is
Yep.
inherently
Movement.
fire driven.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, yep. Again, what calls you to action, what calls you
Hmm.
to make stuff happen.
Right. And for better or for worse, something like a political rally or a pride or something else. Speaking of those gatherings,
Groupthink.
those call to actions, those
Right.
gathering of people who have that energy and that momentum and
Hmm.
movement to keep things going. Those are extreme example or very good examples rather of fire at work in nature.
Or even like attending a concert. Like it can
Hmm.
be so enlivening, but crowd going off for the wrong reasons, or
Hmm.
that can it can also be very destructive, just
Mob
like forest
mentality.
fire. Yes, mob mentality, but yeah, just all that spark of life that we
Hmm.
all as individual humans carry with us, and you get more and more of it together, and you can like just feel it and feel it,
Yes.
that energy.
So
Yeah.
what about water then? If fire is this hot
Well,
burning thing, what about water?
Well, water is one of the elements that I'm very deeply connected with
Hmm.
because
Little Miss
as a
Crab.
water, yes, and crab sign. And then I have like the Scorpio moon, so like water, water, water. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then that's one of the reasons I love the water fire combination, or as you and I have
Hmm.
talked, the steam room, because I have the Sagittarius rising, as
Hmm.
my Sagittarius friend can understand. So, how would I work with water? One of my favorite tools
Hmm.
of spiritual magical use is Florida water, which is like
Hmm.
Florida meaning flower, not the state of Florida, although but
What?
it's floral water. But it's like some people will use like burning smudge or incense to cleanse spirit, but you can also use water. Like
Hmm.
even people get baptized in holy water. There's a
Hmm.
reason. Water elementals are very present in this earth, in this world, and in the spirits.
Yeah, Florida water is great. Any sort of charged water, honestly.
Right.
Moon water.
Yeah.
Um, Even you can even do some sun water. It's a little bit more complicated to use, but you can use water that's been charged by the sun, just like there's water that's been charged by the moon.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Florida water, other combinations of energetic things that get put into a water base.
Yep.
Uh,
Simmer pots are very like working with the water and
hmm.
fire elemental together.
Hmm.
Again, like I said, it's the steam room, and you can throw some herbs in there. You got like the earth, and the steam goes up in the air. So it's simmer pots can be like a whole elemental experience, but
Hmm.
you start with filling the pot up with water.
Right, as the base. And we'll talk again about lots of things going together, but the other one too, potions.
Right. We have a whole
Back
had a whole episode about that.
exactly, potion power. It's potions have that water base, which makes them water magic
Yeah.
generally.
And I mentioned, baptisms, but that doesn't even, I mean, yes, it is a part of the some Christian traditions, but I have pagan friends who have self-baptized
Hmm.
as a reclamation in response to the forced baptism that they were, forced to do as a child into of their parents,
Hmm.
choice of spirituality.
And to a lesser degree, if you don't want to go baptism route, there's also just spiritual baths.
Right.
I
Yes.
mean, the act of throwing various herbs or concoctions or bath bombs, oils, things,
Mm-hmm.
scenting in there and having that connection with salts to create a manifestation of what you're looking at. But again, becomes water magic because it is generally the base of something where water is the base. I think we're coming down to all of these things is what makes it for each element. What is the base? The other things go in top part of it, but what is the base that makes it that kind of
Right.
basic magic?
Well, so for me, I will take a pilgrimage to a lake like
Hmm.
all the time, or the ocean on rare occasions when I can get out there. And I love being able to put my feet in a large body of water. And even with the ocean, sometimes I don't even just want to I don't have to get my feet into it. I want to be in its presence. I want to
Hmm.
witness the awe and beauty. And it's meditative for me just to just sit there and listen and smell. But like I
Hmm.
just love taking pilgrimages to like give my feelings to the water, because trust. I fill up with a lot of feelings.
Mhm.
I'm a big feeler. I have
Well,
big
that's good
feels.
because water is emotions and other things like
Mm-hmm.
other any emotional endeavor that you do or emotional activity is gonna be water based. And here's one that I kind of think of since water is about emotions and feeling and flow, dancing. Dancing is
Mm-hmm.
that flow and movement, and that is very, very water based, even though it's combined
Yes.
with other things too. But at its core is that flow type of movement, which is different than action movement of fire. Even though it's an action,
Yeah.
it's a different kind of pattern to it that makes dancing more of a water aspect because there's oftentimes much more emotion involved in it.
Or like let's talk about emotional labor is
Mm-hmm.
an honoring of the water elemental, like holding space for people, holding space for grief, for sadness, for like some of the emotions that would in, out in society makes people uncomfortable, but being the kind of person like a, therapist or a counselor or, a spiritual
Mm-hmm.
mentor or whatever who can hold space for the more complicated feelings. That is an act of love and honoring of the elemental of water.
Mm-hmm.
Therapists do it all the time. Water, it like we said, it's about emotions, it's about feelings, it's about, letting things flow, going with the flow instead of
Mm-hmm.
fighting the tides or fighting the stream of consciousness, thinking about fighting, yeah, the currents going upriver. No, 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 no. There is a surrender and a release to water where when you can find the flow, like one of my favorite examples about being in the flow, other than we talk about flow state when you're really
Mm-hmm.
locked into your art, but traffic. If you can just not have to be ahead of everybody and, not, have to be behind and, lollygag and slow people up. But if you just get in the same flow that everybody else is going in on freeways, there can be like this zen to traveling if
Mm-hmm.
everybody just takes their turn and gets into the flow. And I always think of people when you're in an airplane and you're looking down and you're seeing like traffic. We see like helicopter footage of traffic all the time, right? And I sometimes go like, wow, that's like a macrocosm to the microcosm of like blood going through our vessels sometimes.
Mm,
We just have
interesting.
to, isn't that, yeah, like don't clog the arteries, man. Go with the flow. Yep.
And like anything else, water can be incredibly destructive. Floods,
Yeah.
monsoons, like other elements,
Tsunamis.
tsunamis, it's yeah, all of that kind of thing taken to an extreme, it
Yep.
can be just as destructive.
Have a healthy respect for the elements because they can be very powerful and we
Yes,
don't
they
have
can.
control over them. And I keep repeating these lessons because it's important. Yes, so water can very much be destructive. It is very powerful. It can wear
Hmm.
away rocks. It
Hmm.
creates sand, as our
And
emotions can be very powerful too. And
yes.
I feel, I just feel deep sadness sometimes for people who were taught to suppress their emotions or to detach from them and to not working with them and listening to them and allowing them to flow through us. Because if you suppress your emotions, they're gonna hang out with
Hmm.
you. And emotions, again, connecting with water, they're meant to go with the flow. You are meant to feel them, work through them, allow for them, and then they did their job and they move on. And that's one of the best sitting down and making time. Feel things.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to intellectualize everything, but y'all gotta sit and feel sometimes too.
Right.
Looking at you, earth signs.
Well, tarot, again, pulling it back and
Yes.
finally circling this around for the water of
Mm-hmm.
element. Tarot is, of course, the suit of cups and, or chalices, any sort of other vessels. Sometimes you'll see in different decks. And again, it's about emotional energy and flow. And like I said, sometimes those messages can be overwhelming. Sometimes they can be the fact that feelings are messages that sometimes you need to come
Mm-hmm.
through and you need to sit with and you need to listen and you need to process them.
It also comes down to messages about your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the moon card is very much connected to water in
Mm-hmm.
a way because the moon, controls the tides. But and the moon card is very much about your intuition. And
Mm-hmm.
the sometimes we talk about the abyss, and sometimes the abyss can be like, oceans of to depths that we can't even humanly reach and how
Mm-hmm.
dark it gets down there. So there's also that element of deepness and the inner knowing. And so water also brings us, and the water tarot suit sometimes brings us into touch with that intuitive part of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, that deep knowing, and sometimes the deep mystery of it all. So
Mm-hmm.
yep, I love it. And I love,
Exactly.
ocean elementals, different water spirits, water nymphs, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very powerful element, and I love it very much.
Yes. And as said, for spirits, we are going to devote an entire episode to dealing with spirit. So that fifth
Hmm.
element will come next time around.
Which also, we were talking about how fire makes me think of spirit. And when I was
Mm-hmm.
talking about the depths and the abyss and the mystery, that also makes me think of spirit, because as much spirit is like the bright light, as above, it's also the as below. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think water can be a threshold to get us into some of the shadow work spirit stuff.
And that
So
makes
yeah,
sense. And I think that's ultimately what we were kind of talking about with the idea of how everything is connected. So even the elements
correct.
are connected with each other. And we were talking about working magic in any form with any of the elements. They all do play a part in something. If you're talking about moon water, you're still talking about the element of air and the spirit of the moon coming through to charge the water. If we're talking about simmer pots, like you said, you're talking about the heat coming in to
Mm-hmm.
boil the water to release it into air vapors, but being putting into elements with earth inside of it. So they all tie
Yep.
together
So
and balance each
beautiful.
other out.
Yeah. It gives us a lesson of how we as humans are multifaceted
Mm-hmm.
beings, and that we can focus on one facet or the other, or we can work on weaving them all together and drawing them all in to work with each other. And we were talking about, depending on the working, where we would start our circle in the
Mm-hmm.
cardinal directions. But also you can focus on a particular combination of
Mm-hmm.
elements and spirit. You don't have to do all five together. You could do just
Mm-mm.
three. You
Mm-hmm.
could do just two. And thinking about what kind of cool combinations you can make, and really which ones would amplify what your intentions are, what your working is that you want to do when you're
Mm-hmm.
working craft and magic.
Right. And we think of opposites and we think of harmonies and balances and stuff. And the first thing you think of when with fire and water, oh, fire and water are opposites, but they're actually not.
In one way we fight fire with water, right? Or though they say don't fight fire with fire, but
Like I
but
said,
no,
it's
water is supposed to put the fire out. Maybe sometimes, but it also creates our steam,
mhm,
you know? They can work together.
mhm. They can work together, but honestly, any element can subdue or enhance another element. That's what makes working things together for it. Because yes, water can put out fire, but fire hot enough can evaporate water completely. But
Mm-hmm.
anybody else ever boiled a pot dry accidentally?
Right?
Yeah, so fire can put out water, air can smother fire, air can also feed fire, earth can smother
Right?
fire. So any of the
Yeah.
elements can work together. Air can, if fire is present, air can be sucked out of a room. Water can, again, reduce or take up the space where air is at. Same with earth. So water,
Water can wear
um,
away earth.
water can wear away earth.
And we
Water,
need fire in order to light incense
mm-hmm,
for our honoring of air. So it's like there's so many different combinations, and they
mm-hmm,
really do all work together in a lot of ways. And they
right.
work with us. I don't know, we've talked about different ways in which we embody the elements, but
Mm-hmm,
we can sit and talk about it all at once. Like think about it, we think of our flesh and our bones as earth, but aren't our bodies made up of like 97% water or something like that?
right. There, our bodies, our blood vessels, all of the water in there. The electrical
Mm,
impulses that fire our
mm.
neurons are electricity. That's fire. Our
The air in our
skin,
lungs, you
yeah.
know? Yeah, the air in our lungs, where we're and the blood flow, the water, right, in our veins, which is taking the oxygen from our lungs and
Hmm.
delivering it to the different parts of our body that needs that. The fire in our
Exactly.
belly that
Hmm.
digests our food and creates energy for us to work with, to think
Exactly.
with. Yeah.
So everything is connected. as we're
Yes.
looking at things. So even though they may have opposites, so north, south, east, west, which would be, if you're looking at that opposite, it's
Earth
earth,
versus fire,
fire, water, air.
water,
But when you
air.
think of the elemental opposites, it's not fire, water. I guess it is fire, earth, air, water are the opposite.
So
So,
very, very cool to consider all of the approaches and
hmm
all of the ways in which, because again, as we say, there is no one right way. There are so
hmm
many different ways in which you can connect with these elements. Sometimes it's as simple as getting the right color candle and having,
hmm
the five candles set out and lighting a green candle for earth, a yellow candle for east, and a, red and blue and a spirit candle. So,
hmm have your four colors, have your four candles, how you set it. Again, you can create a fire magic ritual that where the main base element is fire because, like you said, you are trying to enhance creativity, for example.
mm,
So you do a multicolored candle at each corner, invoking the fire element, but also the element of that color. Same thing applies if you're doing it for something earth-based prosperity. I had very one of the first sets of stones that I collected were just river rocks that were various colors. So I had a red rock and a blue rock and a yellow rock and
that's cool.
a green
Different
brown
ways of,
one. So that
yeah,
became my representation
elemental
of the
representation. Yep.
elemental representation when I was doing earth magic, which still represented the various corners, the various colors, for directions. And you can do that with anything.
Yep. And that's what's really great about working with elementals is that it's so accessible that,
Mm-hmm.
because they exist here on this earth, in our body, on this earth, you
Mm-hmm.
can go out and source your own,
Mm-hmm.
representations of each element. You can go find a feather,
Mm-hmm.
a feather that Mother Earth gifts to you, or a
Right.
rock, that
Mm-hmm.
on a nature walk. A flower could be the passion of the plant, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
could be, represent fire. If you don't want to light things on fire, you
Mm-hmm.
can find like a flower or, Mother Nature is very giving, and the
Mm-hmm.
elements are, life here on this earth, in this life that we're given. And looking at all of the different aspects of it and how they work together and how we can, tap into those vibes and make that a part of our
Mm-hmm.
magic and our power.
Yes, it's always just about honoring the vibrational energy of what you're looking at and using the vibrational energy to best enhance where you want your work to go.
Yep. So
Basis of elemental magic.
I would love to hear how our listeners work with fire and
Yes.
water. Yeah, how they connect with those elementals. So if you have any comments for us, you can find us on Instagram or send us an email or leave a comment on the YouTube videos or whatever. There's all different ways that you can come join the conversation. We love that. So, with that said, I will say thank you for listening to the Career Witch Project. And if you like what you're hearing, make sure to give us those thumbs up and those 5-star reviews and maybe subscribe or download us. I don't know. We love it. We love your interactions.
And if there is a topic you want to know more about or an episode topic you'd like to suggest, please contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle at queerwitchproject. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously. Bye.
Bye!